we've got an amazing panel here today. This is a personal topic for me as someone who battled orthorexia. I've realized that when I go out and I share my story, that oftentimes a lot of people don't know what orthorexia is. They've never heard of the term, they've never heard of the condition. I was the same way. I had never heard of it until months into my own personal recovery. So one of the things that I really try to do now is to have some of these conversations about maybe the lesser talked about items in the eating disorder world. So I'm really excited to have a panel today to talk a little bit more about orthorexia, and hopefully we can all walk away with a better understanding of exactly what it is. So I will go ahead and let the panelists introduce themselves. We'll go ahead and start. I've got Allie on my screen here first. So I'll let Allie, if you want to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jason. And so excited to see multiple people on this call. So as Jason said, my name is Allie Pesta. My pronouns are she, her. And I too feel really personally connected to the topic of orthorexia. I have been in recovery from orthorexia, anorexia, and exercise addiction for over 10 years. I like to say in recovery because I kind of look at it as a thing of, it could always come back at some point. Although I feel like I'm 99.99%, there's still that one element. But my eating disorder has definitely been a huge part of my life. And I've taken really throughout my recovery hold of it. And so I now am an eating disorder recovery coach. I lead some of our support groups at ANAD. And I also recently published my memoir, Beyond My Body, Recovering from a Complex Eating Disorder, Reclaiming Movement and Finding My Worth this past October. So it's been an awesome journey and super, super excited to be here and talking about a topic that definitely does not get talked about enough.
All right, thanks, Allie. Glad to have you here. Next up, we've got Barbara Reese. Barbara, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Jason. Very honored to be here. My name is Barbara Reese. I'm an eating disorder specialist. I have a practice. It's in its 29th year. Will probably be 30 this year. So that's a lot of, we believe in full recovery because we've seen it happen over and over. So our practice is in Montclair, New Jersey, and we're virtual around the United States and internationally. So our practice is resilience, DBT, and eating recovery because we're dual specialists in eating disorders and eating disorder treatment and dialectic behavior therapy. We're also, we do mostly, really have transitioned over the years to mostly evidence-based. I'm FBT certified. So we're like beyond passionate about early intervention. And we're a team of 5, and we're just very committed to the field and our clients and our community.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you here, Barbara, and thank you for all of the incredible work that you're doing. And our other panelist today that we've got is Caitlyn. Caitlyn, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jason. For those who don't know me, my name is Caitlyn. I use she, her pronouns. I am in recovery from orthorexia for the past 11 years. I also have lived experience with anorexia, and really raising awareness around orthorexia and just eating disorders in general has really become my life's work that sort of propelled me into my current career as a dietitian and as a dietitian working in eating disorders. I currently work at the partial hospitalization day treatment level of care virtually through the Emily program in Washington State. And I've been a dietitian for about 3 years and have also worked in inpatient level of care. And I also recently became a certified eating disorder specialist. So I'm going to do a little plug for my supervisor, Elizabeth Peterson. You are awesome. Thank you. I wouldn't be here without you. Yeah, I just, really, again, made it my mission to raise awareness around orthorexia and, both personally and professionally, and I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to have you here. And again, this is an amazing panel of people that I get to chat with today. Just to introduce myself really briefly, I'm Jason Wood. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at ANID. I also have lived experience with orthorexia. I was diagnosed back in 2020 and I've been in recovery now for, I can't believe it, 4 years, and just have really dedicated a lot of my work and passion to raising awareness around this condition and around eating disorders in general, because it's definitely something that unfortunately we're not talking about enough, and there's still a lot of stigma and stereotypes out there that are preventing people from getting the help that they need. So hopefully it's through conversations like this we can raise that necessary awareness and help people get the help. So with all of that said, we'll go ahead and dive on into the conversation here today. The first question that I've got, I would love to direct towards Barbara, because you've got an amazing page on your website about orthorexia. It is so detailed and really explains a lot about orthorexia. So the question that I've got is, how would you describe it to somebody who has never heard of orthorexia before?
The way I would describe it is that somehow what's taken a hold of the person is a different relationship with usually both food and body image, of really a lot of rigidity, obsessions that kind of go beyond where their mental health headspace is also taken up with this. And it can be very, I think it's because it's so cultural. I believe orthorexia is so culturally acceptable that it can go undiagnosed and untreated and unrecognized for a really long time, because it's kind of cool. I mean, like we have a saying too, like for kids, it's like lunch is cool, because it's like it's not cool right now to eat lunch with friends, to be seen eating lunch. So I think I think it's one of the most insidious eating disorders because it's so acceptable, but it takes on a hold of really overshadowing who the person is, overshadowing their self-worth, that as if someone's self-worth is really defined by how obsessive and clean eating, how they can eat clean, and how they can exercise, 7 days a week, even with a fever, those kinds of things, where things are really kind of where there's no rest days. So there's just, I would say, by rigidity and flexibility, and the amount of time and mental space it takes up.
Yeah, I totally agree with the rigidity piece there. And I saw Caitlyn and Allie both shaking their heads too, nodding their heads in agreement. So Caitlyn, Allie, did you have anything that you would want to add to that description of orthorexia?
Yeah, I think one thing I would add too is just thinking about like this idea of what it means to be healthy. And that is such a like convoluted word, and it has so many meanings, and I don't think there is one way to be healthy. It's what health looks like for each individual person. But orthorexia looks at this stereotypical idea of health when it comes to exercising, I just call it movement, like obsession with that and thinking about every single thing that you put into your body. For me personally, my orthorexia got to a point where I started to think that foods that I deemed bad would actually poison me. So it was this extreme fear of foods that if they weren't on my clean food acceptable list, I was a terrible person. There's a lot of morality around it too, of like, I'm a bad person. I feel a lot of shame when I don't eat in this rigid way or move my body in this rigid way. And so it becomes an obsessive that's tied to your worth, and that if you are not the epitome of health, even though it's not healthy, if you're not at the epitome of health in this state of orthorexia, then you're not a good person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I going off of both of your definitions, Barbara and Allie, I also want to add, and this actually, I feel like I can speak to this personally as well, this obsession with this perceived healthfulness, healthy eating, starts to manifest into like cutting out all, most food groups. For some people that might be, everything except for like 1 or 2 foods. For me, I got to the point where I spent an entire summer only eating kale. and I actually developed hypothyroidism from that. So I really want to kind of stress the importance of like, not only is this like a socially acceptable eating disorder and leading to this mental piece, but also this really malnourished piece too. There's a lot of, malnutrition that comes into play, and can often lead to other eating disorders, and obviously co-occurring conditions can also worsen the obsession, and then also can sometimes actually lead to death. So it's a really scary thing, and often, like we're saying, really not well known and very, unfortunately, socially acceptable.
Caitlyn, sounds like you're describing a gateway drug, right?
Yeah, one of the things that it impacted me was the fact that everybody around me was praising me for my behaviors for so long. They'd say, "Oh, I wish I had the dedication you had or the discipline you had." And I think that's why I tell people all the time that orthorexia, I didn't have to hide it. I wasn't trying to hide it because I didn't think there was anything that I was doing wrong. I thought I was doing the right thing because of what society and because of what diet culture has told me for so long. And then it didn't help that the people around me were also saying that too. They were applauding me for these behaviors that were really having some detrimental impacts on my mental health, my physical health, my social health, just my overall well-being. So that kind of segues into to this next question. And Allie, I'll throw this your way first. But what are some red flags that we should be looking for? Like, when does it cross that line from, oh, I want to eat healthy, I want to take care of myself, to this full-blown obsession that's having those detrimental impacts?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question, Jason. And also, I want to double down on that praise. There's a chapter in my book called Praises from the Gym, because it was like, I'd be at the gym, be like, "You're the hardest worker in the room. Oh my gosh, like I wish I could work out like you, or you have such dedication." Little did they know, like, that was my entire life. And so I think that stems into the red flag of it becomes so consuming. I think one of the things is, if it's not for, obviously there's things like allergies and whatnot, but you can't eat out with friends. You are bringing your own food because you're scared of what's going to be there. You're avoiding social situations. You'll choose working out over even working or being with people. And when all you can talk about is food and exercise, maybe you're doing a lot of research on what's the latest trends. And so I think the red flags is when you recognize that it is, and you likely don't recognize, but other people start to recognize that it impacts your life on a daily basis, and you cannot function without what I like to call, to some degree, I know Barbara, you just mentioned like a gateway drug. It feels at times like this drug, like if I don't get my dose of movement, or I don't get my dose of this clean whatever you're choosing, or your eating disorder is choosing for you, then you cannot function. You can't focus on anything except for, really the disorder.
Yeah.
Yeah, Caitlyn, Barbara, did you have some additional red flags of kind of when it transitions into that harmful obsession?
I know my thoughts. I want to hear Caitlyn too, because I similar.
Yeah. I think, when I am, evaluating folks, as a dietitian, often that's actually like when they're actually receiving treatment, but you can even think about it as like, before going into treatment, maybe starting to notice, again, like maybe the person is, saying, okay, I need to, cut out X, Y, and Z, or, only eat these certain foods. Often spending, hours in the grocery store, really focus on like the quality of food versus maybe like quantity of food, which we often see in other eating disorders in terms of the quantity of food. But with orthorexia, it's really around the quality of food often. And then, really feeling a lot of, guilt for eating outside of those certain foods. And like Ali said, it becomes all consuming. May co-occur with exercise, movement, you know, disorder. That was in the case of my case as well. Really just irritability, those sorts of things. And then again, also just like that isolation of that often accompanies eating disorders is like, okay, like I need to be alone, or I can't go out because I need to have this certain food, or I need to bring my own food in order to be able to do something. And then it meant that all those things may often actually come before maybe like the medical pieces and things. So just because those medical pieces maybe aren't quite there yet doesn't necessarily mean that like it's not an issue.
I wanted to add to that I think also Caitlyn also touched on some of the mental health picture of that when one starts having this extreme routine around certain foods and exercise, it's what happens when that routine gets broken, or things that what stuck out for me the most, Caitlyn, was the anxiety. Well, one is the anxiety that occurs if just watching how the anxiety happens when you can't go to the gym 7 days a week, or you can't eat the same lunch every day, or the irritability, and then the social isolation. And I think that's really one of the real I have a long list of red flags, but that's definitely one of them, is when there starts to be social isolation, and this routine, it starts taking over one's life. And then all of a sudden, so it's not who the people are you're going out to socialize with at night. The food gets on the front burner, the people get on the back burner, and all and I mean, just like, well, if I can't bring my certain foods with me to the restaurant, or the restaurant won't allow it, then I'm not going to go. But it's really the isolation, I think, and the withdrawal that happens when this routine takes precedence over the quality of one's life.
Yeah. To add on to,
and again, many red flags, and certainly nutritionally, it would be a long list, I'm sure, that just when food groups start dropping off, one's rejection of their cultural foods and the foods of heritage. There's a lot of things that are red flags. We're pediatric, so I'm usually thinking about kids, but at any age, it's when the rejection of food groups and rejection of anything also related to one's cultural heritage.
Yeah. There's a lot of red flags out there. That is for sure. And one of the things that with that social isolation piece was, I was thinking about how it took precedence over vacations or social outings. I actually skipped friends' birthday parties or weddings because I didn't want to, face those foods that weren't part of that routine. And it definitely had some detrimental impacts on my social health. Barbara, one additional question that I wanted to kind of throw your way is, you mentioned how it's kind of a gateway drug in a sense. Do you think that there's any sort of gateway from orthorexia into anorexia, or maybe vice versa? Have you seen any relationships between the two conditions there?
Well, anorexia would be considered more extreme, but I think all the eating disorders are gateway to another eating disorder. And as a practitioner, I also look at eating disorders as acute versus chronic. And we're trying to get in there, as early as possible. And your prognosis is going to be better today than it is tomorrow. Today is really the best day to start. And so they all can kind of blur. And I usually find when people report that they had one eating disorder that went to another form, they're usually not when you look at their history, they're not in treatment during that time. I think it's usually while people are not in treatment, when people are swinging from orthorexia, anorexia, or anorexia to bulimia, that really typically doesn't, in my experience, doesn't happen while someone's in treatment. That shouldn't be. That should start slowing that process down. Does that answer your question, Jason?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah,
so it's all that can segue to something else. It's really intervening, and the best time is today. It's, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think that's one of the common misconceptions we've got out there is that eating disorders fit into this nice little package, this little diagnostic criteria, and it's like, no, they're shapeshifters. Like it can change over time. So yeah, thank you for answering that. And now to shift gears a little bit here in our conversation is I want to talk a little bit about social media and orthorexia, because I know that can have some really harmful impacts on body image, or perhaps what we're seeing, what people eat in a day, or those types of posts that are out there. So I'll start with you, Caitlyn. How do you think social media is playing a role in orthorexia?
Well, it definitely is. I can first start that. Yeah. I know, like I had to cut down on my social media because I was seeing so much. And even now, as being in the professional space, even unfortunately with influencers or even sometimes other dietitians who are not versed in eating disorders, it can really get out of hand. And what really bothers me the most are like those what I eat in a day things, because then that creates that comparison, and then you're looking, and then that can really, we know that eating disorders have a genetic component, the psychological component, and then an environmental component, and social media is very instrumental in unfortunately increasing the prevalence of eating disorders. And yeah, with like the Fitspo and the Thinspo and all those types of things, it can really get out of hand. And often one of the things that I end up doing with a lot of my clients, regardless of eating disorder diagnosis, is just like really saying, okay, what if we started adding some folks who are like more recovery oriented into your feeds, and that sort of thing, because yeah, it's like just because it's like a wildfire. Definitely.
Yeah, Ali, Barbara, anything you want to add there with social media?
Yeah, I can add. So I think for my personal story, social media wasn't really big when I started, if we can believe it. But 10 years ago, it wasn't huge. So Instagram wasn't the way it is now. However, I think something that is really continued to kind of put fire to the flame is how much praise the orthorexia and orthorexic trends get. We see, I think it just even goes to speak to weight stigma that we have. We have people, all the time. It's like, oh my gosh, how did you get that body? Tell me what your diet is. Tell me this and that. And praising that thin ideal or that fit ideal body versus when it comes to, oh, hey, I'm actually taking care of myself. And maybe that does result in weight gain. That is not praised in the same way that these trends and a lot of behaviors that stem from orthorexia are praised. So I think one, yes, everything that Caitlyn touched on, the what and I eat in a day and the Fitspo and looking a certain way does, and then also I think something that's really scary is just so much with AI and editing and how what you look, you're like, oh, I don't know what this looks like. And so we're grown up with this false sense of ideal of what a body should look like. So something that I really work with a lot of the people on is thinking about how much ideal body has evolved, and it's a moving target that never stays the same. And so really being able to look at oh, back in ancient history, what was the ideal body and how it's evolved over time to showcase that there is not an ideal body, but it's really hard when we are just hit on a daily basis of what you should look like. But yeah, 100% think that social media is playing a huge role in it. And there's definitely strategies to combat it, but definitely playing a huge role into it.
Yeah, I feel we probably could also each talk for 8 hours on this topic alone. And when you asked the question, Jason, my heart just sank. It's so heartbreaking. There's some new trend going on right now. All the preteens and young teens in our practice are obsessed with their jawline. and spending hours a day looking at their jaws and, you know, and feeling like they have to, whatever they eat or not eat is going to change that. And this is heartbreaking, really, that this level of idea, I don't know what's going on right now with that on social media, but you see these trends, you see they get acted out in children where who they are is just not acceptable to themselves. And they have to change that. And they actually believe they can kind of alter themselves, but they believe they can alter themselves by restricting. I work with a young teen African-American girl who actually believed that she, you know, restrict and starve, she could actually change the shape of her body and her bones. You know, like it really, that level of altering, which we get down to the core essence of self-esteem and self-worth, that all, you know, we're supposed to carve yourself and shape yourself into someone who is not you, somebody else.
Yeah.
And as Ali was saying, it's not even someone else. It's an actual fictional. It's not even real people.
Right.
So it's very sad to me, but.
Yeah, it's very difficult, and it's one of those things where we definitely have to protect our kids and protect the youth when it comes to social media, because I was like Ali, like I did not grow up with social media. I didn't have it, but I still felt that pressure. I still felt that pressure to look a certain way, and it definitely it had lots of negative impacts on my self-worth and my self-esteem. And I can only imagine what children and students have to go through nowadays, where they can't escape it. They've got it at school, they've got it in the classroom, and now they take it on their phones with them everywhere they go. All right. So now I want to dive into a couple of questions kind of specific for each one of you. And the first one, Barbara, since we were just talking, I've got you up first here. But how would you approach treating an individual who comes to you who's battling orthorexia right now?
Well, the good news is if someone made an appointment, they do have some understanding that they have something to work on. So that's the good news. But really similar for all eating disorders is really just to get to know who the person is, to find out when we do an intake, we want to know where they've been, where they are at this moment, and what their goals are. But to really find out what is this history, you know, to kind of get a history of their relationship to food and body image, and, you know, and then look for all those elements, you know, as a, you know, eating disorder can be triggered, you know, there can be genetic family history, can be, you know, social personality, but I find there's always like a perfect storm that somewhere at that when that moment, when they can go back and identify, and it's usually much earlier when a parent, let's say the parent will think it started at 12, but it really started at 9. And what was going on then? What were they thinking, feeling? What were the influences? You know, and lots of times it was gymnastics or what. Now it wasn't not only the coaches, but it was the mothers giving all their other daughters lettuce or lettuce sandwiches, but to kind of find, but there's usually never one answer. There's usually a perfect storm. So kind of connecting with a person about what that is and getting to know them and finding out their understanding about when and how this became took over their life, and kind of getting to know that and what their value systems are. What do they value, and how did this become, if there's a pie of values, like how did this end up taking up so much of that pie over family, friends, connection, love? Like how did this, to kind of, and get their story, find out the person's story.
Yeah, it's almost like you've been watching my presentation, because when I go around and I speak to students, one part of my presentation is talking about that perfect storm. And I literally have a slide that says the perfect storm, and it talks about the different factors that contributed to the development there. So that really resonates with me. And Caitlyn, I'm curious, because I know that you've done a lot of research on this topic, but what's the connection with patients with diabetes and orthorexia and that relationship there? For me personally, this really kind of hits home now because I was diagnosed with diabetes in my recovery. So I've had to learn to balance recovery from orthorexia while also learning to adapt to being diabetic. So I'm curious kind of what you found in your research on that topic.
Yeah, so when I so this was my research for my master's thesis through the University of Minnesota. And essentially, I wanted to kind of look into like, what about like this perception of needing to radically change diet to treat, different disease states. And I settled on diabetes. And honestly, it was really mind-blowing because essentially, the typical way of, treating diabetes is, okay, let's, count carbs, let's, change, not eat like any sugar or do these sorts of things. Like that's often like what is told of, to folks in treating diabetes. For type 2 diabetes, and then that doesn't even like go into the fact with type 1 diabetes, there's often insulin abuse going on. So it was really, I would say like that having diabetes, I found could be almost like an addition to that perfect storm that you were talking about, Barbara and Jason, around like have like with that mind, if someone already like has the, let's say the genetic and psychological pieces in place for an eating disorder, then being told to radically change their diet and cut things out, then that actually leads to to this mindset of like, okay, I need to eat like a certain quality of food. And what was interesting is we actually found, wasn't unfortunately statistically significant, but we actually found that type 1 diabetes adults were about like, had a prevalence of like orthorexic tendencies based on the Ortho 15, which was created by Dr. Stephen Brotman, who actually coined the term orthorexia in 1997. Through that questionnaire, I had folks fill that out anonymously, and we actually found that people with type 1 diabetes actually displayed a higher prevalence of orthorexic tendencies, about 67% versus 63% for folks with type 2 diabetes. It's still, anything like, it's still really high for both groups. And it just goes to show that even when we're counseling about, different disease states, that we can't, we really have to be thinking mindfully about how we're approaching this, because somebody may be at risk for an eating disorder and we don't know. And I would say I've been spoken to dietitians who have seen this pattern in folks with cancer. I've actually seen this pattern in folks with cancer, or in remission from cancer. Like they were told, I can't, have sugar because that leads to my tumor growth. Okay, like, cutting, then cutting, that leads to cutting things out. And then that leads to sort of this extreme behavior. So we really, I guess my takeaway from that is it's definitely prevalent, definitely needs to be studied more across all disease states. But just thinking about like, if you're a professional dietitian, therapist, medical professional, counseling clients on, working through these disease states, really being mindful of like not encouraging folks to cut things out, because that could be kind of that tipping point towards orthorexia.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. I tell people now, since I received my diagnosis, is it's almost like I've got like the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder, telling me like these opposite things at times with the eating disorder recovery and the diabetes. So it's been a balance, but I've been grateful to luckily have a treatment team that understands my history. And I think that is so important, that treatment teams and physicians understand if their patients are, are battling an eating disorder or have a history of an eating disorder, because that can definitely impact a diabetic especially. But there's other health conditions that exist out there that will co-occur with orthorexia, mental health and physical health related. So Caitlyn, I'll start with you here, since we've already been chatting, but have you seen other individuals present with orthorexia and say OCD or another kind of mental health condition? And kind of what's the approach there?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I have seen more often than not, orthorexia is co-occurring with, anxiety disorders or obsessive compulsive disorder. I think that highlights kind of what we were talking about earlier with that obsession piece, and sort of all consuming. And often, for me, with orthorexia or really any disorder, I really focus on ensuring adequacy first, and ensuring that someone is getting enough food, and often just starting with okay, let's start with a protein, starch, and fat, and then going into, and we also in at the Emily program we always do desserts at least one meal. And we come from an all foods fit philosophy, so really trying to kind of start with those basics, and then as someone is more nourished with just those basics, then adding in variety, and then that often those exposures often help with some of the co-occurring disorders, and then obviously bringing in therapy, medical, psychiatric providers can also be really useful in those situations, so that the person is not feeling like they're just getting, treated from one side of the equation, because we know that eating disorders are really complex. So yeah, so I think just really focusing on that adequacy, and then that often we know also that adequate nutrition also really helps mood and some of those other co-occurring disorders as well.
Thanks, Caitlyn. Barbara, did you have anything that you would like to add there when it comes to orthorexia and co-occurring conditions that you've seen?
You just give me a time limit.
The floor is yours.
To also piggyback off what Caitlyn was saying. So I've always said, as an eating disorder specialist, I treat eating disorders and everything that goes with that. But I really, one of the most important things I think is adequate nutrition, because poor nutrition and malnutrition in and of itself causes anxiety and depression. So I really like to see someone, I don't really like to even diagnose till I see someone adequately nourished, because some things melt away that looked really problematic when someone's well nourished. So both for when we treat children with FBT nutrition, we first focus on healing the brain and feeding the brain. And everyone in my practice at Resilience Therapy is trained in CBTE from Christopher Fairburn in the United Kingdom, which is transdiagnostic, that for all eating disorders, we want to first start with regular eating. We want to start with adequate nutrition, because really at the end of the day, for every diet, there's an equal and opposite binge. So that I like to kind of treat what's left over. Let's see what happens after the person has. So I believe in nutrition first. As a psychotherapist, I like to see someone, with a really healthy state, and then we'll treat what's left over. There'll probably be things to treat. OCD definitely is a kissing cousin to orthorexia, can be. Anxiety can be, and the family history, the genetic component. But again, let's see what happens. Let's diagnose as a healthy person, who's been able to, which is why I love CBTE for older adolescents and adults, because it really focuses on regular eating, consistent eating. We do the 3 3s and 3s, the protein, carb, and fat every 3 hours, 3 meals, 3 snacks, going for a lot of 3s, and then let's see how the person is. And of course, during that wave, whatever anxiety, whatever their reactions are to that, you use psychotherapy to get them through it. But that's my philosophy.
All right, thanks. And look, you did that in 2 minutes. See, you didn't even have to give you a time limit there. So we do have a really good question in the chat that we'll get to here in a minute. But I do want to get Allie involved in the conversation, because I don't want her to feel like we've forgotten about things. So or forgotten about you. But one of the things that I admire most about you, Allie, and I've followed you now for a while, is just how you've been so vulnerable and so open and authentic in the post and in the content that you share, and how you've shown us that you can find balance in recovery. And I think that's so important because as somebody who likes to live an active lifestyle, it can be hard to find that balance in recovery, because you might fear that you have to give up what you enjoy doing. So I'm curious what you've found in your recovery that's helped you find that balance.
Yeah. Oh, tough question. And thanks for that of sharing. And I think the first and foremost thing that really changed the trajectory of my recovery and treatment was I went to a treatment center called the Center for Balanced Living. It's now an Emily program in Columbus, Ohio. And we actually had a sports psychologist that worked on the team. And what I was really challenged by in my previous treatments was I felt like I wasn't seen as the full person. I do fully believe that, yes, nourishment is key and we need to focus on that too. But what was happening with me was they were like, okay, once your heart stables, once you're stable, you get to move. And so it was just this like swinging back and forth, because I'd start moving again and not in a healthy and controlled way. And then I'd get back to this place where, oh my gosh, now I'm malnourished. And it was just this kind of like seesaw that I could never find balance. And so the sports psychologist I worked with, she truly changed my life. And I was given a movement plan, just like I was given a nourishment plan. And so for the first time, I felt like I was seen, because I've always been a mover. I love to move my body since I was like literally born out of the womb. And I just love movement. It lights me up. And it was before, it was like, you either move or you don't. Like, you're never gonna, I had a doctor actually tell me, like, you're never gonna run again. You're gonna be subject to walks and yoga. That's it. And that felt like I was like, well, I don't want to live if that's my life. For something that's amazing, but for me, moving my body in other ways was so important to me and the way I felt alive. So getting that movement plan and really working to also understand kind of the psychotherapy and how I can create this relationship with movement that I say is life-giving, not life-taking. So again, it's been such a work in progress. It's still a work in progress every single day. But when I work with a lot of athletes and runners. And one thing that I have them do before they move is stop, pause, take a few breaths, and ask yourself, why? Why am I choosing to move my body today? And if your primary reason is aesthetics, or because you feel like you need to earn your food or anything like that, my challenge is to choose a rest day, or maybe step away and come back. So I think, like, really getting in at the why, that's just one strategy I use. There's a lot of different things, like a movement inventory and whatnot, but I find like orthorexia a lot in athletes as well. So again, really looking at movement as the full picture. It's a part of you, understanding your why, understanding how you can really still move your body, but move your body in a way that lights you up. And then the last thing, I know this is long, but the last thing I would say is movement and community has been a game changer for me. We talked about isolation at the beginning. I used to move in isolation because I was like, they're slowing me down. I can't work out hard enough. And I was so afraid to move in community. And I started getting at the root of that. I was like, oh, I'm afraid because I feel like it's not going to be enough if someone's like holding me back. And so really challenging myself to move in a community, and move in a community with people that, also share health at every size, and really see movement as a way that can help to add to your life, not continue the eating disorder.
Yeah, that was the why question. To me, that's so important. That's something that's been told to me too, because I'm the same way. I love to be active and to engage in activity. And I have to ask myself, am I doing this because I want to, because I enjoy it, or am I doing it because I feel like I have to as a punishment, or, in that regard. So that why is so important. I've got another question for you, Allie, too, because you, like me, we published books, memoirs on our experiences. And I'm curious what the response has been to your book since it's been out there. And how do you think storytelling plays a role in raising awareness?
Yeah. Oh, man. Publishing that book, It's definitely, and I spoke to Jason, we actually got to meet in person. I spoke to him pretty openly about it. It definitely was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, in the sense of, oh, thank you, Brianna. In the sense that, you know, I was putting stories out there that no one had heard. And I still get choked up thinking about it, because it took a lot of courage, and I didn't realize that the week prior to publishing, I had a panic attack and was like, I'm not putting it out there. No way in hell. I do not want people to read this. And then afterwards, I had all of these messages flood in, like, thank you. I've never felt so seen. And something that my editor challenged me to do, my book originally had kind of like lessons I learned from each story. For context, it's vignette style. So it's a bunch of short stories. And so she's like, take out those lessons, because you're taking the power away from someone to be able to take what they want and learn in their own way of sharing in those stories. And so I've had people reach out that have never experienced an eating disorder, but they understood, you know, my chapters about having an anxious mind as a kid, or thinness and smallness, and all of the different areas of the book. So it's been awesome. I think one of the coolest parts is there's a lot of stories about my mom and I, and family and I, because they were a huge part of my recovery. So my mom and I have actually been able to support a lot of different families in their treatment, and supporting them and finding treatment, and approaching it both from like the parent and the child support. So the response has been awesome. I think for me, storytelling is incredible. It's how I see the world. And I truly think the way that we best learn from each other, in a sense of listening to understand, not to respond, is through storytelling. So I highly encourage, whether that's one person or in whatever way, sharing your story, and even pieces of your story just help to give, it just helps to humanize eating disorders and anything that anyone is experiencing.
Yeah, we all have a story to tell. We've all overcome something to get to where we're at today. So, Allie, you were touching on it with your mom, and it's the perfect segue into the last question that I wanted to throw out to the panel, and then we'll be able to get to a couple of questions from the audience. But Caitlyn, I'll start with you. What advice would you give to someone who may have a loved one who they're concerned about right now, who's kind of showing signs of orthorexia?
Yeah, thinking about Allie, when you brought up, you know, your mom, and like kind of working with kind of from that loved one experience. My mom is actually, you know, in the audience right now. And I think, you know, one thing that I remember during my recovery, and something that I continue to bring into, you know, encourage loved ones, if I, you know, work with them, whether that's adolescents or adults, and, you know, spouses, parents, is really, you know, and this is something that my mom really cemented in me, is like coming at things, you know, from a place of compassion and curiosity. So really just kind of asking, you know, your loved one or your friend, your family member, whoever the person is, like, hey, like, you know, I've noticed, you know, X, Y, and Z things, you know, what might be going on there? Like, and maybe, you know, maybe they haven't opened up to anyone yet. And so you may be the first person for them to open up to. And that can really kind of start the ball rolling for maybe seeking, you know, professional treatment, and, you know, whether that's outpatient or, you know, a recovery coach, or whoever you find is accessible to you. But really, you know, I always say, like, just that compassion and curiosity. That really, really helped me, you know, coming from my mom, and then after that, coming from my treatment providers as well.
Yeah, the curiosity, I think that's so important. One thing that I tell everybody is to approach those initial conversations from an I perspective rather than a you perspective, because it can feel like you're accusing the other person and push them farther away. So always try to start with some of those I statements. Barbara, I'm curious if you have any advice for loved ones out there.
That when an eating disorder comes into a family, it belongs to the whole family. You know, we're not here to fix someone's kid, or that I think it's really about everyone being open, looking at themselves, seeing whether there were food and body exercise biases in the family. The first thing, you know, family members do is look at themselves and to kind of take care of some of those things. It could be, if there is a contributing factor, lots of times there actually isn't. It can, yeah, but if there is, to look at that. And then I guess I'd also have to say, if you go to providers that say, oh, they're going to have this use or the rest of their life, switch providers. I just say, you know, we're in our third decade of seeing people to full and complete recovery. And what happens when you stop using all your energy to change your body, you then free up your energy to go change the world. And even like the teens and get very political in our practice. They'll go to college and they'll be like, oh my God, they'll go into the dorm. Everyone's talking about, like, you know, how being skinny, and they're like, can we like change the topic? How about if we go out and vote? How about if we like, you know, so I think that full recovery is possible, and then to just stay only with community, support people and providers that believe in full recovery. That's my advice. Because it will happen, and it's something, it can be time limited. And what I really believe about eating disorders is they are progressive illnesses. And the more you drag out the treatment, you're giving the eating disorder power, and you're giving it time to grow deeper roots. So the earlier, the better. No matter what stage you're in, the best time is now. The prognosis is better than if you allow those roots to continue to deepen.
Yep. And you're never not too sick for help. If you're having any concerns with food or exercise or anything, talk to somebody. So we do have one question that popped up here in the chat, and it's kind of going back to different forms of treatment, but it's when a person has orthorexia and it's caused by the fear of vomiting, what would the primary focus of treatment be in that case? Would it be EMDR or a more general eating disorder program? So Barbara, is that something that maybe you could answer?
Yeah, I would say that the form of treatment is ERP. Exposure response prevention is it's called emetophobia, and that's been the most successful.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's also part of a generalized anxiety. So we have a lot of people have gotten over emetophobia, but ERP, I would say, is one of the treatments of choice.
Okay, great. Great. So we've got like 3 minutes left here. I want to check in with the panelists and see if there's anything else that you would like to share with our audience that's here today on orthorexia. This has been an incredible conversation, and I want to thank each one of you for joining us. But if there's anything that you'd like to share, definitely feel free to.
Yeah, I think one thing I would say to add on to kind of like the loved one piece, my mom says this all the time, and something that she really was challenged by at first, but you can't fix it as a caregiver, but you can support. Like, the person has to also want it, but that listening to understand, not to respond, and recognizing like you can't fix it, but you can be there every step of the way. And then for someone who's maybe in it, I would say, you know, recognizing that the progress isn't linear. It's going to be like this. There's going to be steps forward and back. And I actually was just chatting with someone this morning of saying, not looking at it like steps forward and back, but they're all parts and they're all steps that are part of the journey and the process to healing. And you're worthy of it. You're worthy of recovery. You're worthy of a life that's not consumed by food and exercise and all of those things. So you're worthy of a life that's so far beyond that.
Thank you, Allie. Yeah, Barbara, Caitlyn, anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think someone asked, like, what's your definition of full recovery? Like, for me, it's I think going into not a place where you're not where you actually have a life worth living, where you're not just existing. So, you know, and focusing on things that, you know, maybe previously you had given a lot of energy to your eating disorder, to giving energy to other things besides, you know, food or exercise or, you know, other things. So really, I think that, like, that it comes down to like that quality of life, like okay, am I living or am I existing or am I actually fully living? That's where, like, when I think about recovery, that's what I think of.
Thanks, Caitlyn. All right. Well, we are approaching the top of the hour here. Again, Barbara, Allie, Caitlyn, I want to thank each one of you for this conversation today. I hope that we've raised some awareness, inspired some hope, and helped some people understand a little bit more about orthorexia. And hopefully this is just the start of more conversations to come, because I really had a great time with all of you today. For the audience that's joining us, I will be sending out a recording of the video afterwards. There will also be some contact information so you can keep in touch with the panelists here. And I want to thank everybody for taking some time on your Friday to spend it with us. And I look forward to connecting again soon. So take care, everyone.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.